Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We really want to have everything wrapped up by Labor Day so we can restore bus service for students returning to UBC.
The city of Vancouver starts clearing away that crane that toppled over during a massive fire in Dunbar. Plus,
more than a quarter of the province is sitting at drought level 4, which is not great.
While rain and cooler temperatures lower the wildfire risk in parts of BC, the drought danger is still very real. And
he's safer to be there unsupervised on school grounds than he is to be trying to walk home.
Hundreds of Surrey families say bus service is being cut for their kids, some of whom live with disabilities.
The intention is always to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as you possibly can.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Crews are now starting to remove that crane that collapsed in Vancouver's Dunbar neighborhood. It toppled over during a massive fire 2 weeks ago, blocking a busy road. As Pinky Wong reports, the city hopes to have it reopened by the time students return to school.
Workers are finally clearing what's left from the crane that toppled onto 41st Avenue near Collingwood Street. It collapsed during a massive fire that destroyed a 6-story apartment building under construction on August 6. No one was hurt. The city says WorkSafe BC has given it the green light to begin the operation.
It will only take 2 days, but there's a couple weeks of planning that had to go into that. It is a demo operation. We're demolishing the crane, not salvaging it.
The city is aiming to restore the road and reopen it by Labor Day.
Right now, we're clearing some of the road plates that we put down to protect the pavement so that Fortis can be on site just in case, as we start to move the counterweights from that are buried into 41st Avenue in front of the house that was cleaved in half. We're just making sure that the gas lines weren't damaged.
Fire officials, meanwhile, say they still don't know what sparked the fire.
This is a difficult case. As you can see, there's not a lot of physical evidence to rely upon. So there's a lot of witness statements and other evidence that we're using. What I can tell you is that the fire has been determined accidental.
On the construction site itself, the owner's Sightline Properties will be responsible for the cleanup, and they're expected to evaluate the damage done on the concrete before resuming the building of the rental housing. The city says they're expecting to start construction again in 6 months' time. 81 people were forced from their homes because of the fire.
We continue to support approximately 15 people who were displaced from their homes as a result of this event. We expect a few folks will actually be moving into new places this week.
Officials add part of the crane could be recycled. Pinky Wong, CBC News, Vancouver.
The deadline is looming for Canada's 2 biggest railways and their unionized workers to find deals. The country's commercial rail network could grind to a halt if Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City cannot hammer out agreements with the Teamsters Union. As Susanna De Silva explains, a shutdown could paralyze the movement of goods and hit transit as well.
If there were to be a rail shutdown, there will likely be quite a backlog at the Port of Vancouver. The port says that 2/3 of all goods that move in and out from here are moved by rail. 90% of exports also are moved by rail. They've already reached out to incoming ships to tell them to slow down to try to prevent some of the congestion and backlog. We spoke with some logistics companies that are now juggling, trying to find ways to move goods for companies. But of course, there is an issue of supply of trucks to be able to compensate for everything that is moved on the rail lines. Of course, the other issue here is for commuters, because of course the West Coast Express is also along the rail line. So if that shutdown begins, that will also have to stop. Now, a number of business groups say consumers could fairly quickly begin to see some of the impact, some of the juggling that's happening because of goods also increase the cost, but also in terms of scarcity. We spoke with a manufacturer of consumer goods in central Canada that ships out here to Western Canada, and he says there are some stockpiles, but they aren't that big.
There is some real challenges in regards to availability of product for consumers. We have built up some inventories in Western Canada, but you're looking at maybe a week or 2 worth of incremental inventory. After that point, there will likely be shortages, delays.
The other point he raises is the reaction from consumers if they start to see that items are scarce or hear about potential scarcities. The other issue being raised is around water treatment. A company here that deals with 70% of the water treatment in cities in Western Canada says they can only move chlorine by train and that they are urging the government to step in.
We are looking at a value chain that cannot stockpile, to have inventories on hand to keep weathering the storm in terms of whether there's a strike or not. So we're urging the government to go ahead and step in now, immediately, because there's already impact to public health that is going to be coming. It may not hit next week, but it will hit.
We did speak with Metro Vancouver, who says they have topped up all of the tanks of their supplies for their water treatment, and they say they are confident there are some other supplies they can access here in Metro Vancouver, and so they don't foresee a problem. But of course, the question is how long any potential shutdown could last. Susanna Da Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Prime Minister is now expressing outrage after reports 100 Jewish institutions across Canada received bomb threats this morning. Justin Trudeau says the RCMP and local police are investigating. 2 Jewish agencies say the targeted institutions received an identical email. Synagogues, community centres and hospitals in Toronto, Ottawa and Montreal separately confirmed they had received the threat. Police in Montreal checked a building in the west part of the city. A spokesperson says the department had consulted with its anti-terror squad and its hate crimes division. In Toronto, meanwhile, police searched buildings in the north part of the city after a bomb threat there. And Ottawa police were dispatched to several hospitals, while a spokesperson at one said the situation was there, quote, low risk. Here in Vancouver, police say an email has been sent to a location in the city, but don't believe it to be an immediate threat.
It's degrading. And it is debilitating. And when you have to deal with this on a regular basis, whereas one week somebody sets fire to the front door of your synagogue, and the next week, a number of weeks later, they're receiving bomb threats. These are things that are meant to instill fear and trauma in a group of people.
Vancouver police say they are boosting patrols and working with community leaders as well as the RCMP. Cooler, wetter weather has now lowered the wildfire risk in some parts of our province, allowing crews to get the upper hand on some of the blazes sparked this summer. But much of BC is still in the grips of severe drought. And as Michelle Gassoub reports, emergency officials warn that situation could turn dangerous very quickly.
I do want to be clear. Despite making progress on many fires, we are still in the core wildfire season, and we must remain vigilant and alert.
Provincial officials sending the message loud and clear. BC isn't out of the woods.
We're in a better place than we were last year, but last year was terrible, right? So we're in a better spot, but more than a quarter of the province is sitting at drought level 4, which is not great.
BC headed into the summer with a record low snowpack, but so far has avoided a worst-case scenario. While over 350 fires are burning, there are just 18 properties across BC under evacuation order and around 1,600 on alert. A relief from this time last year when fires raged through the Okanagan. But the impact on the landscape has been big.
BC has had almost double its average annual area burned this year so far. So in terms of community losses and evacuations, definitely been a quieter year for us here in BC, especially compared to last year. But in terms of fire activity, it's still been and still is a very active fire year.
Wilkinson says an isolated mixed weather pattern this summer kept fires from exploding out of control. Hot, dry periods were interspersed with storms across different regions of the province, and that helped keep fires small. But as of this week, the fire risk remains high in the north, with officials closely watching the Coria Creek wildfire.
On that fire, there is still some potential, I would say, in terms of increased wildfire activity, as we are seeing less precipitation and some more warmer and windier conditions.
Officials warning that as drought conditions persist and the risk of lightning remains, conditions can change with little warning. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Our science and climate specialist, Darius Madavi, is back with our first look at the weather. Good to see you, pal. And you have that familiar map up.
I do, yes. And as we just heard from Michelle, the fire danger has come down in the south and has stayed low for a little while. In the north, it has actually come down a little bit compared to yesterday, but much less so than we've seen in the south. Fire danger remains quite high. Across the province, temperatures are going to moderate a little bit this week, which is a little bit of good news. Maybe spike a little bit for the southern interior over the next couple of days, but then come down. And generally, our precipitation has really helped. Now, this is earlier today. This is the last 12 hours across Vancouver Island and much of southwestern BC, and you can see all that moisture filtering into much of the province. If we zoom in here, this is just the Fanny Bay or Fanny Island weather station. You can see, as predicted, that 30 to 50 millimeters that we were expecting, more or less coming in. I was going to show Campbell River, but the data's not coming in, but around there too, between 30 and 40 millimeters for Campbell River as well. So generally speaking, a lot of that moisture coming in has helped quite a bit. Vancouver Island is still under level 5 drought conditions, which is the worst possible level. Tomorrow we're going to get a drought update, and maybe we'll see that improve a little bit given the moisture we've seen this week, but drought conditions take a long time to really budge, so don't expect to see too much change. Generally across the province, we have those water spout warnings across, just off the island and in the Strait, and then we have those weather advisories, some thunderstorm risk really blanketing southwestern BC tonight, so be ready for that. And generally, other than that, we'll talk a little bit more about the precipitation that's on the way later this hour.
Okay, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
More than 500 families in Surrey say they've been told their children will not have access to school bus services. They include hundreds of students who live with disabilities who have support needs. As Mira Baines explains, the school district says it's facing a funding crunch, and cutting transportation was necessary to protect classroom needs.
It's really, really hard, and I can't do it with my job, and I can't change jobs anymore.
Nicole Berg is facing an uphill battle after a cut to school bus services for children with special needs, including her son Marcus, who is going into grade 11 at Lord Tweedsmuir. It's a struggle to find a solution as both parents are working.
To find an able-bodied person who can pick up my son, who is partially verbal, who can't communicate with a phone accurately, to a school that is overcrowded and now has extended days. There's constant traffic.
She and hundreds of other parents say they received letters denying access to transportation services for the upcoming school year because of a $3.5 million funding cut. They're going public by issuing a news release to call attention to the issue just 2 weeks before the school year starts. Parents are trying to work out a plan with their school principal so their children who are vulnerable can stay safe after school.
He's safer to be there unsupervised on school grounds than he is to be trying to walk home.
Overall, parents say busing for students with disabilities and support needs has been reduced by half. The Surrey School Board confirms there is a budget shortfall and transportation is not funded by the Ministry of Education, but the board has been providing the service until now.
The intention is always to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as you possibly can.
This Surrey School Board trustee says while the ministry provides overall funding for education, it doesn't account for inflation, which boosts costs and population growth.
We've made our pitch to ministry about all of these increased costs that we can no longer sustain because of the massive increase in student population we get every year.
The ministry responded with a statement from Education Minister Rachna Singh, who is also a Surrey MLA. We understand families of children with complex needs face unique challenges, and we regularly meet with provincial advocacy and stakeholder organizations to discuss equity and accessibility in education, said the minister. She does not specifically address a solution for the families who are struggling with these cuts. The minister's response is cold comfort for those who are trying to work out a plan for their children in September. Mira Baines, CBC News, Surrey.
If you have an issue you would like to ask BC's Premier about, we have a venue for you. Tune in tomorrow, Thursday at noon, when BC Today guest host Amy Bill will be joined by Premier David Eby. He will be taking your calls and emails for half an hour from noon to 12:30, so do not miss your chance to weigh in. BC Today starts just after 12 p.m. on CBC Radio 1, on CBC Gem, and you can watch on our CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Police in Kimberley are reminding people to check their tires before they hit the road after more reports someone is purposely loosening the lug nuts.
I already started slowing down. I got to about probably 70, and then the back driver's side tire just came right off the truck and went whizzing down the highway.
In the incident, there have been 10 reports of loosened nuts in the Kimberley area. RCMP are urging drivers to report anything suspicious to their local detachment. There are some decidedly mixed results from a close look at the health and wellness of Indigenous people in BC. The study is monitoring First Nations people's health and wellness from 2020 to 2030. It finds the high school graduation rate for status First Nations has risen since 2021, and infant mortality has also dropped. But the overall mortality rate has increased, with life expectancy dropping from 73 to 67 years. The First Nations Health Authority's chief medical officer wants people to know the data is more than just numbers.
The findings in this report are not just numbers. They represent individuals, families, and loved ones. These are people who are currently trying to live their lives despite challenges, and the data also points to people who have lost their lives due to COVID-19, due to the toxic drug crisis.
The study also recommends improved access to culturally sensitive health care and advancing First Nations rights and self-determination. Homeless shelters in Victoria are going to be expanding. BC's housing minister says 72 extra beds are going to open.
This was not easy, but we have found opportunities to expand existing sites, to renovate, to fix up so that we can get people indoors. And this is going to be incredibly important for us. 20 of those beds opened yesterday. So we are already working to get people indoors, and the rest of the spaces will be opening in the coming weeks ahead.
The mayor of Victoria says this will help the city's urgent temporary housing needs, while BC Housing builds longer-term homes. Kelowna also announced a $2 million investment alongside the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness to help better coordinate supports available in communities across BC. But some property owners are starting to notice the impacts covenants are having on creating more housing density. Those covenants on some properties stop people from replacing single-family homes with multi-unit ones. It's something Kelowna says they're working with local governments to address. The clock is ticking, meanwhile, on a drop-in service for people living with homelessness in Surrey. Funding for the Cove Healthy Living Complex of Care is set to run out in 2 weeks. Our Caroline Chen dropped by to find out what a shutdown could mean.
Right now we are inside the Cove Healthy Living Unit, which we fondly call CHILL.
Oh, I like that name now. Yeah. What kind of services do you offer here at CHILL?
Well, the services here range anywhere from being able to do your laundry if you're on the street, public washrooms. We have 2 public washrooms. We have 2 showers. You can go inside, lock the door, and have a nice shower. We have both warming in the winter and cooling stations in the summer when we get the extreme weather. My name is Jack O'Halloran, and I am the CEO of Surrey Urban Missions. We got a one-time grant from UBCM through the city, and we knew it was a one-time grant, but I don't think anybody expected us to serve over 40,000 people in that 1 year that we were open. We run almost 24 hours a day, every day of the week.
But we're coming kind of to the end, right? There's a date.
It was early May that we figured we were out of money, but we found some extra. And then I got a little reprieve. I had an extra grant given to us from BC Housing, and they said I could keep it to keep this place running longer. But as of September 2nd, we will run out of funds to be able to safely operate.
It's just a policy that people need to have a place to get clean. I mean, they can go to community centers, but if you don't have the money to go to community centers, right? So I'm saying I think it's a good thing that they have to have places that people can get clean. And their laundry, you know, they'll be out there all dirty, and this place cleans people. They help them, and it gives them dignity, right? They can go out and say, "Hey, I'm clean today," and there's a lot of people who need to change, make a choice in life, and they say, "Hey, I'm changing, and I'm looking clean. I have a place to look clean, and I can go to this college course, or get some courses and get off the streets and work my way up. And this is a stepping stone, right, for them. I'm just saying. So I just hope the government realizes that some of these type of places are needed.
My name is Mackenzie. I'm a caseworker or a community connection worker at the Cove Healthy Living here. This is the only place they can go for the absolute bare necessity resources. And without them, ultimately it's harm reduction. Without showering, using the bathroom, having clean clothing, people's health are at risk, and this is the only place that they can get it. So there's absolutely a major impact if we were to lose this place. And not only that, we have more clients than what we can handle. We have hours of people waiting just to get into one of our bathrooms, let alone if we didn't have one. So it's really important for the community, and that's what I most directly see when I see clients come in here and the impact that this place has.
Not everybody wants to stay in a shelter. And in all honesty, we don't have near enough shelter beds. There's still over 1,000 people on the street, just in the Wally area. So we don't have that many beds. So to be able to have this kind of service, where even you could just go and get some respite from the day, is a huge factor. You just come in for a coffee and a bagel or a sandwich and talk to somebody, without being seen in a different, strange light.
What needs to happen between now and September 2nd?
Well, we have to find, whether it's a private donator, whether it's a church. We actually had a phone call from a church asking how much it is to run monthly, and could they contribute for a month or two. I mean, it costs about $60,000 to run this thing every month. And I mean, if we get 60 in, I'll keep it open for another month and another month and another month. We've gone to the city, and the city's done the best it can. They don't have the funding this year. The province, BC Housing, doesn't have the funding. So we're looking for anything, and as long as I've got a day left on the calendar, I'm going to hope that something shows up.
So September 2nd, if it passes, what happens to the space then?
We'll clean it out. We'll empty it all out and clean it. I believe the city of Surrey leases these units, so I understand this will all be taken away, and it'll be a vacant lot.
To go from serving the community in such a big way to a vacant lot just seems like a real, it hurts.
It does, and knowing the people, different from even an investor or the city, but knowing the faces of the people that come here. And until September 2nd, we are going to hope that somehow, some way, we get blessed with the ability to keep this open, because it is a much needed facility.
Investigators are now trying to piece together a fire at an industrial manufacturing building in Kelowna. Take a look. Earlier in the day, crews knocked down a blaze at a building officials say is used for heavy manufacturing. They warned there were compressed gas cylinders involved. Mounties evacuated nearby buildings. The fire chief also advised people near the area to close their windows and avoid the smoke. Still to come, being stuck in space might sound like some people's worst nightmare. 2 astronauts are now facing that dilemma for real. The push to get them home after this. Time is ticking for NASA to decide how it's going to get 2 American astronauts stuck on the International Space Station back to Earth. It's been 3 months since Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams went to space on Boeing's Starliner, but that vehicle is now facing technical problems, stopping it from returning to the planet. Joining us for more is Aaron Boley from UBC's Physics and Astronomy Department. Aaron, we appreciate you being here. What is it like for these astronauts who went up to space thinking they'd be there for 8 days and could be there for months?
Well, with Wilmore and Williams, they're both veteran and professional astronauts. And in the preparation for the mission, they went over many different contingencies and possibilities. The 8-day mission was always the minimum mission. And so they knew that there was the possibility of having it be extended. Now, whether they were thinking about, going from 8 days to 8 months, that's another matter. But they've already integrated into the crew on station. They're doing work up there, maintenance work, as well as carrying out science activities. And so for the professional astronaut, this is part of being an astronaut, this uncertainty. Space flight is not a routine task, and we're seeing that play out in real time.
Just to clarify, with them being up there, more people being up there than expected, do they have enough food and water and all that?
They do. Fortunately, the ISS is continuously resupplied, and so there was a recent resupply mission that actually just docked with the ISS, and that brought provisions for the astronauts and extra supplies also for Williams and Wilmore. Some of those supplies that they had to give up on their mission because they took up extra cargo with Starliner.
Now, speaking of Starliner, what are the main issues with that vehicle that's stopping it from being able to come back to Earth?
Ultimately, it's about attitude control. It's the thrusters. So when they were docking with the ISS, there was an issue with some of the thrusters, not all of them. They were able to eventually continue. But basically, it deals with the helium control. And they think what happened is that there was some overheating in the system, and it causes some expansion of materials that ended up blocking some flow. They're not sure whether that will happen on the re-entry. And that's one of the things that they're trying to figure out. Attitude control is incredibly important for that re-entry and getting the spacecraft configured in just the right way for safety. So they have to make sure that that's done right well.
So depending on how long it takes Starliner to get fixed, if it can get fixed, are there other options to get the 2 astronauts back to Earth?
Well, there are. And with Starliner, it's just a matter of understanding whether it's within the mission parameters. And Starliner remains the emergency return. So if there were a decompression event, for example, a meteorite or a piece of space junk punctured the ISS and all the astronauts had to return quickly, they would still come back in Starliner at this time. But if NASA and Boeing decide that, this is not going to happen with Starliner for the return, then the idea is to integrate them into Crew 9, the SpaceX vehicle that will launch sometime in September, depending on how quickly they are able to make the decision. And they're going to fly then empty 2 seats, and with that carry new spacesuits so that they'd be able to come back with the Crew 9 Dragon.
Quite a commute and quite a wait. Aaron Boley, we appreciate your time and your perspective. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
He was added to Kamala Harris's ticket 2 weeks ago. And tonight, Tim Walz, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, will give the biggest speech of his career so far. Stay with us. Tim Walz is set to deliver tonight's headline speech at the Democratic National Convention. The Minnesota governor was not well known on the national stage until Kamala Harris picked him as her running mate. The CBC's Katie Simpson has more on what Democrats hope to hear.
We are inside a space called Dem-Palooza. During the day, while there are caucus meetings and strategy sessions, Democrats come here to this place. They can get merchandise, they spend time with like-minded people, they sort of come and browse a bunch of kiosks, and you can even get your photo taken with a cardboard cutout of Kamala Harris, as we're seeing right here. There is a lot of energy and excitement about Democrats in this moment, but tonight is all about the vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz. People we spoke with are looking to hear a message of unity, and they're keen to learn more about him.
Tim Walz understands regular families and how they're dealing with things, and I'm just looking forward to a team at the top with Vice President Harris and Governor Walz that really cares about every single person in this country and not just a few.
I want to hear what he wants us to say to people in rural areas and what are going to be the things that he and Kamala plan to do for rural America, because America really is a rural country.
So I think he's just, an average guy and just, like the kind of guy that you'd want to have, be friends with and hang out with and just, normal and can relate to a lot of people. And I think Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are both, from middle class backgrounds and, can relate to what people are struggling with.
Democrats we've been speaking with tell us they're feeling unified, they're feeling energized, especially after listening to last night's speeches by former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama. Both went on the offensive, attacking Donald Trump and Republicans.
There's the childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes.
They always say, sure, please stick to policy, don't get personal. And yet they're getting personal all night long, these people.
Well, the vibes, this convention might be feeling really positive, might be feeling really strong. The reality is this is going to be a very close election, and they urged everyone to get involved and to help get out the vote come November. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Chicago.
U.S. President Joe Biden and presidential candidate Kamala Harris spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today to discuss the proposed ceasefire and hostage deal between Israel and Hamas. The U.S. Secretary of State left the Middle East last night.
On the fierce urgency of now. This needs to get done, and it needs to get done in the days ahead, and we will do everything possible to get it across the finish line.
Negotiations are supposed to resume tomorrow in Cairo, but today an Egyptian mediator said Hamas won't agree to the current proposal. It claims Israel has been adding demands. Blinken says Israel has accepted the proposal. The urgency to reach a deal follows Iran's threat to retaliate for the killing of a Hamas leader in Tehran. The bodies of 5 people have reportedly been found on board a luxury yacht that sank off the coast of Sicily earlier this week. The bodies are being removed from the capsized boat and taken ashore, but search efforts have ended for today. The wife of British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch owned the boat. He and his 18-year-old daughter, Hannah, were among those listed as missing. A Canadian who was the chef on board died when it sank. His body was discovered early in the search. 15 people managed to escape to safety. The yacht was caught in a storm and went down about 50 meters of water on Monday. It's believed the vessel may have been hit by a waterspout. Over the last year, over 200 housing builds have gone bust in Canada. After the break, we find out why projects are falling through, especially when the demand for housing is higher than ever. He's back. Our science and climate specialist, Darius Mahdavi, joins us with our second look at the weather. That's a busy map.
It is. This is the upper levels of the atmosphere. So this is a low pressure system up in the atmosphere that's coming down. It's been sitting off the coast of BC, finally going to make its way in sort of late this week into the weekend. And then slowly, once that makes its way in, spreading some precipitation sort of late Friday to parts of the interior. We get a little bit of respite late Saturday into early Sunday in terms of that rain here on the coast. But then you'll notice here, if we wait for this to circle, here you go, this next low going to sweep in, possibly bringing some precipitation up to the more northern parts of the province. And we'll see that here. Take a look. Over the next few days, we have that precipitation at times filtering in, some rough showers tomorrow, probably across much of the region, but generally a lot drier than it has been. Maybe even a little bit of sunshine across much of the coast and the island, but still mainly cloudy. Then a little bit of that precipitation makes its way into the southern interior as well late Friday. But now if we add on a little bit more data to this, we're going to switch to a different model because we're getting a little bit further out. But as we get into the weekend and into Sunday especially, some of that rain properly makes its way into parts of the north. So hopefully that'll be a little bit of good news for the fire danger situation up there and just bring some much needed moisture to much of the province. You'll notice it's fairly widespread, that rain, but a little bit early to say for sure. But as we get into next week, probably a week from now, we may start to see summer return. Just a little bit of good news. Now, you'll notice those temperatures coming up in the southern interior over the next couple days, before then falling back down as we get into the weekend. So again, temperatures coming back up, but in terms of the fire situation, probably not enough to make too much of a difference. And again, we'll get another update on the drought situation tomorrow, so we'll take a look at that. For now, though, take a look. We got lots of sunshine across the province tomorrow. A little bit of showers possible for parts of the island, mostly early in the morning and then returning possibly late in the evening on the island as well as up in the northwest. But generally, tomorrow's fairly calm and fairly sunny. Not much risk of convection across much of the province, so don't expect to see too many thunderstorms like we have been recently. So again, a little bit of good news there. Tonight in Vancouver, it has seemed possible that we could get some thunderstorms across parts of the lower mainland, including in Metro Vancouver. That seems to be, the risk is more or less over now, but I just wanted to throw it in there in case something does happen, but I don't think it's very likely at all at this point. A few isolated showers overnight and then maybe returning early tomorrow morning. But as we get into the next few days, some more showers tomorrow early in the morning and then back in the evening, and then very rainy Friday overnight into Saturday with the possibility of some very widespread thunderstorms. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you have a camping trip planned this weekend, be prepared. That's what I'll say.
Very good advice. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Over the last year, more than 200 real estate developments in Canada became insolvent. The CBC's Andrew Chang explains why, at a time of high demand for housing, a growing number of projects are falling through.
This housing development in Kitchener, Ontario. The plan was to build 4 condo towers, complete with a rooftop sports field. It would have added more than 500 residential units to an area where housing is pretty tight. Things look good. The project got city approval in 2020, and the first tower was supposed to be move-in ready by 2024. But that didn't happen. Instead, only one of the 4 towers was started, and it wasn't finished. This project is one of more than 200 housing developments that went insolvent just in the last year alone. That rate of insolvency is nearly 50% higher than the 10-year average. And many of these developments are big buildings that could have housed hundreds, often even thousands of people.
Real estate-related insolvencies have been number one by a significant margin for the last year.
And the experts we spoke to say this is only going to get worse at a time when there is a huge need for more housing.
There's 2 completely opposite thoughts. The public is told endlessly there's a housing supply problem, like endlessly. It's just infinitely repeated. And then the public now has to say that, oh yeah, nobody will buy them.
So what's going on? Let me start by showing you how these projects are supposed to work, and then I'll show you where it all goes wrong. So normally, a developer buys some land, draws up some plans, and gets all the right approvals from the city. Then, before a single shovel hits the ground, they're starting to sell units. Generally, 20% of the price up front, the rest once the building's finished. And they're trying to sell most of these units, at least 70%. Otherwise, banks won't lend them the millions of dollars they need to actually build the building. Now, crossing this threshold is a critical phase of the project because at this point, the developer is in deep, hoping construction goes according to plan. Fast forward a couple of years, the building's done. The developer closes on all of its sales, collects all the money, buyers still owe them, people start moving in, and the bank gets paid back with the profits. Everyone walks away happy. But in the last few years, developers have been hit with a perfect storm of trouble. Lucrative projects going into the red, often with no way of recovering their costs. Trouble number one, the pandemic.
The pandemic has pushed prices beyond what anyone might have expected.
An unprecedented surge in demand has sent prices here soaring.
Demand is here, and supply is here, so price just goes through the roof.
And there was money because the government was giving out lots of money. So prices went up quite a lot, particularly in the development industry.
Between 2020 and 2023, it became more expensive than ever to build in Canada, according to RBC economists. Industry costs up more than 50% across the country. Just look at the price on key materials. Concrete up 55%, structural steel up 53%.
Every part of the system was stretched thin to try and maximize the capacity of building housing because the demand was enormous. And so once those prices get up there, and it trickles all the way down through.
The cost of labor jumped too, because there just weren't enough workers to meet demand. Competing for those workers meant paying a premium. Wages went up almost 10%, nearly double the pace of other industries, if you could find the right tradespeople at all. According to the Ontario government, at one point in 2022, there were more than 28,000 construction jobs that went unfilled. That was about a 33% jump over the previous year. And when you don't have workers, you have delays.
Developers who started out before COVID and were not finished before COVID, and it didn't matter how much they weren't finished. Like if it was only 10%, it's still a big problem, because they're getting a lot of delay and they're getting a lot of cost increase.
But developers weren't just getting hit with high material and labor costs. Fees and taxes developers have to pay the government also went up. In 2019, development fees on apartments of 2 bedrooms or more were about $45,000 for each unit in a development. Fast forward to 2024, the fees on the same 2-bedroom apartment units are about $69,000 each. That's a 51% increase in 5 years, and that's on each unit. In a really big building of 500 units, where let's say half are 1 bedroom, the other half are 2 bedrooms, that's an increase of nearly $10 million.
Before I even really put a shovel in the ground and I just get my permit, I immediately have $30 million in costs that I'm now having to pay interest on.
Yes, interest, something every homeowner dreads talking about, except forget your puny $500,000 mortgage and see what 6 or 7% interest on $30 million or more adds up to.
A significant part of the cost of the developer is the interest it pays on its loan. And of course, as this goes on, their loan is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They've got no way to repay it. And the interest amount is going up like this.
And this is around where this perfect storm comes to a head, because after running into so many unexpected increasing costs, materials, labor, fees, taxes, interest, everything's at a breaking point. When a project fails, people who've been waiting can be completely out of luck. Their deposits could just evaporate. And sometimes, unless another developer swoops in to save the project, there's just not much the original developer can do to recover. Because maybe you're thinking, no problem, everything's gotten more expensive, that's inflation, so the individual units in the building should be more expensive to compensate, right? Well, but remember, the problem for our borderline broke developer is that they've already sold 70 to 80% of the building's units just to secure bank loans to pay for the thing in the first place. And those sales were at 2020 prices, which means most of the expected revenue is fixed, way below cost before construction even begins. So you've got maybe 20, 30% of your stock left. All you can do is jack those prices up to recover as much as you can.
Sometimes you see projects that are under construction with inventory. The inventory is priced 30, 40% higher than what they were initially sold for, because they're using that inventory to make up for costs that have come up through the construction or through that time lag.
But realistically, who's all that eager to buy a condo at a 40% markup on what every other unit in that building sold for?
It's been crickets for me. I mean, I don't really necessarily have any clients who are reaching out looking for new construction. Because the average price is quite a bit higher than the average resale condo.
According to Urban Nation, that's a real estate consulting firm, in the first half of this year, new condo sales in the Greater Toronto Area were down 57% from the year before and 72% below the 10-year average, which makes selling any available inventory at that higher price very, very difficult.
Because this is what many people don't understand is there is an ultimate point where people won't pay the rent.
And that fact affects developers at all stages of a build, because even if we rewind back to the earliest phases of development when they're still in pre-sale mode, maybe the right thing to do is just price in all of your unexpected worst-case scenario costs into the original sale price, right? Well, again, who's buying at that price with interest rates being what they are?
Maybe they would have paid it a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but not today.
It makes sense that a lot of developers are now having a tough time selling these units and are now just pulling out of projects altogether because they can't sell them.
So the next time you hear the solution to the housing crisis is simply to build more supply, that may be true, but it's not so simple.
They got their goat. How a new family pet in Alberta became a local hit in town and online. You will want to see more of this.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On September 14th, celebrate Indigenous community, culture, and spirit at the 3rd annual Come Toward the Fire, a free outdoor festival where CBC is proud to be invited and return as the exclusive media partner. For more information, visit cometowardthefire.com. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
A goat named Boots has become a local celebrity in Lethbridge, Alberta, on social media as well.
The CBC's Ose Irate now on the dwarf goat and his growing herd of fans.
After 2.5 years, it's still the same reaction. Oh my God, is that a goat? Can I pet him?
Yeah, very gentle.
Come and see him.
So we're Susan and Jeff, and we own a 2.5-year-old Nigerian dwarf goat named Boots.
We had our dog Carly for 16.5 years, and then we had to put her down. Got on YouTube, and what's the first video I find? Baby goats in pajamas. And that's how it started. He was born on our anniversary, and we went over to see him, and he was one of 4 brothers. When we picked up Boots, he tucked his head in underneath our chin, cuddled right in, and wanted to go to sleep. There was no challenge. He's our goat. You can't have a single goat like we do unless you're committed to being with him 24 hours a day. So he's not for everybody.
Started with our walks and our walks
Here.
around here, around Henderson Lake. You know that people come out for a walk for a number of different reasons, but everyone kind of looks the same. You don't know about their mental health and what's happening in their life that day or that week or that month. But when you have Boots with you, they open up. When they're leaving, they open up about the joy that he's brought to their life, to their day, and how much they needed that. And that's just been remarkable.
Oh, so cute. I would stop and pet that goat.
Would you?
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, I was camping on Vancouver Island the last few days, and we stopped in Coombs.
Oh.
See the goats on the roof?
Goats on the roof.
Yeah, didn't get to pet them, but very
You're
cute.
a true British Columbian
Yeah.
now.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6.
And Tanya Fletcher will have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the National. Good night.